Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about a possible Russell Wilson trade. At least one NFL GM commented on that, so I thought we would at least discuss it on the show. So let's get right into it. As an anonymous GM said, he'd trade the quarterback right now if there was a market for him, referencing Sean Payton and Russell Wilson in an article by the Washington Post from NFL analyst Jason Liconforia. So, initial thoughts, like no shit, Sherlock. It's one of the worst contracts in the NFL. Russell Wilson is being dramatically overpaid for the production he is putting on the field. Like, ignore what Denver gave up to get him, right? Because that's done. That's over with. The picks are gone. The picks have been used. We can kind of move on from that. Now the challenge for Denver is getting $230+ million out of Russell Wilson because they're getting a decent amount of good play out of him this year, but nothing to what they gave up for him and what they are paying him to do. So, yeah, I'm not shocked that if Sean Payton could trade Russell Wilson and if some team called and said, I had an epiphany last night that my team will win the Super Bowl if Russell Wilson comes to my team with some gold plates, yeah, I bet Sean Payton would be deliriously happy to trade him. But that phone call is not going to happen. That conversation is never going to take place. So this is a major long shot. But there is something to people looking up in the deep dark web. What does Denver have to do to get on from Russell Wilson's contract? And it's not good. So if you move on from him before June 1st of 2024, this upcoming June, the dead cap hit is $85 million. The cap savings is negative $49.6 million. So you're just not going to end the season and release him in March. That's not happening. But what about if you were to, trade him before June 1st? Well, the dead cap hit is $68 million, so it goes down a little bit. The other team takes up a bit of the tab, but the cap savings is negative $32 million. So you're just not moving on from Russell Wilson before June 1st, no matter what, really. But there is maybe a tiny % chance of if you were to release him as a post-June 1 designation. Then the dead cap hit for 2024 is $35 million. That's not great, but that's manageable for one season. But the 2025 dead cap hit is about $50 million. So we're still nearly at $90 total million in dead money. And I just do not see a way that the Walton Penner Group says, hey, we are going to sign off on an $85 million paycheck for a player that's not on our team anymore. You're fired. Like, that's just not going to happen. No GM could go to their boss and say, I know I got you to agree to this $230+ million contract right when you bought the team. That was a mistake. Can I keep my job and can we pay him $90 million to get away from us? Yeah, George and Sean, well, maybe not Sean, but George Payton for sure would be out of a job. So I just don't see a way that happens. Now, if you could find someone to trade for him after June 1st, this is much more physically manageable, right? $18.4 million, that's no biggie. $49.6 million in 2025, still not good, but the $18.4 makes it look a lot better. And the 2024 cap savings is $17 million. But I don't think you're going to find a single team lining up to trade for Russell Wilson. A lot can change between now and June 2nd of 2024, but I think it's a major long shot. So as for Russell Wilson being traded before the deadline, that's not going to happen. As for Sean Payton wanting to trade Russell Wilson, he knows that's not going to happen, so there's no real point in talking about it, but it at least is an interesting segment or an interesting tidbit from an active GM and not some former GM, which would just be a talking head on ESPN. Russell Wilson this year has quietly put up some solid numbers on paper. 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I mean, he had 16 touchdowns in all of last season. He's already about to pass that mark before the halfway mark of the season. So he's off to statistically a good start, but we know that he has suffered and he has not been at his best when they play real defenses like the Chiefs and the Jets and not the Raiders and the Bears. But so far in Denver, the Russell Wilson experience has not been a winning one. 6-16. Wins are not a quarterback stat. I know that, but still, 29 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, over 5,000 yards, and 62% completion percentage. So, like I said, Russ is not living up to the contract, which is the reason why Denver would want to trade him. if there would be any insane GM out there to trade for him to begin with. But he has improved this season. And listen, I had a lot of takes going into the season. If you remember my summer hot take segment, I gave a lot of predictions over the course of the summer. But one of them was Russell Wilson will be better this year. Why? Because the bar is so low from what he did last year. It would be nearly impossible for him to do worse. Is he where Denver wanted him to be when they made the trade? No. Is he anything like he was in Seattle? Not really. But he's better than last year, that's for sure. And there are bigger issues on this team right now. If Denver thinks that trading Russell, if Denver thinks, for example, that if a team called and said, we'll do whatever it takes, I don't care how stupid it is, we'll trade for Russell Wilson in his contract, yes, the Broncos would make that trade. But if they think that the next Sunday or the following Sunday, they're going to start winning ball games, they are going to be severely disappointed when they realize, oh, the defensive line, the offensive line, CB2 are huge issues, and Russell Wilson is not responsible for those issues. But will Russ be the starter in 2024? That's the question I want to toss your way right now. Yes or no? Give me an honest assessment down in the comment section whether or not you think Russell Wilson will be the starter in 2024. Personally, I think he will be. If they do draft a quarterback, my prediction is he will sit behind Russell Wilson. Maybe if he wows Russ and the rest of the front office and training camp, kind of like how Russell Wilson got the starting job in Seattle, Wilson could end up being his own Matt Flynn, if you will. But outside of that, no, I think Russell Wilson, will return in 2024, and he will start to begin 2024. Now, next up on the show, I want to talk about the latest trade buzz on Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton as we get closer and closer to that October 31st NFL trade deadline. But really quickly, a word from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy sports app where all you have to do is pick more or less for 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Prize Picks is super simple and user-friendly. I spend 1 to 2 minutes on the app every Sunday morning making my selections. So I've already gone ahead and looked and see what's out there for this upcoming Week 8 matchups. And here's what I'm going with. I'm in the more group. Give me C.J. Stroud more than 239.5 passing yards against the Carolina Panthers. Give me more on Trevor Lawrence, 239.5 passing yards as well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'll take more on Breece Hall, 66.5 rushing yards against the New York Giants. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. The link for that is in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Going back to the article we just referenced earlier with the anonymous NFL GM, the Washington Post, Jason LaCanfora, also had this to add on Jeudy and Sutton. Wide receivers Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, both recent high draft picks, have been the center of trade talks since before Payton arrived, and I would be shocked if at least one isn't moved. So first thing I want to say is Jason is no Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport. I don't think his word is the word of God, okay? The Washington Post has never been known to break NFL trade rumors. So just because Jason LaCanfora thinks that could happen, I'm not going to say put it in stone. It's a guaranteed fact. However, I will agree that if Denver does get some offers for these guys, they should take them. I've been saying this for weeks now, and I'm not going to change my tune because they beat a bad Green Bay Packers team at home by 1 score. If you can get second or third rounders for these two guys, trade them both and begin the hard reset. We'll look at the stats this year, and we've looked at the numbers before. Sutton's having an outstanding season. He has dramatically increased his trade value. Well, Jerry Jeudy has played better the last 2 weeks or so, but the numbers still aren't there. And if you're just going to go off the raw numbers, Judy's not going to pop off the page as, now that's someone I want to give a second-round pick for. I also think last year when we saw Chase Claypool go for a second, it probably scared some GMs from making that same kind of trade for a guy like Jerry Jeudy, given how quickly it did not work in Chicago. But every player is different. It's not always apples to apples. Now, if I had to predict what a trade could look like, what about Jerry Jeudy to the Carolina Panthers, who are looking for a wide receiver for Bryce Young, in exchange for a second-round pick, But Denver also sends over a future 5th-round pick to kind of soften the blow, if you will. If you don't deal Jerry Jeudy right now, you run a major risk of his value sharply declining. What if Jerry Jeudy doesn't figure it out the rest of the year? What if Jerry Jeudy finishes the season 800 yards, 2 touchdowns, which he's on pace for less than that right now, I think. So that would be an improvement from what we've seen thus far. If he finishes in that neighborhood of yardage, you're not getting a 1st or a 2nd rounder for him in the offseason. He'll have 1 year left on his contract. It'll be nearly $13 million fully guaranteed. So good luck finding a team to give $13 million fully guaranteed to a guy who just had 800-ish yards and like 2 to 4 touchdowns. No, you're going to be happy to get a 3rd-round pick at that point. So if you don't think Jerry Jeudy can be your wide receiver 1 and someone you want to give a 2nd contract to, trade him now, because I just don't see how his value goes up. Sure, we could see a nice run at the end of this year like we saw last season, but that's a big get. That's a big risk. That's a big gamble. If you don't get that run, man, I mean, you could have gotten a 1st-round pick for him, according to some reports, back in March. And fast forward 12 months later or so, and you're going to go from getting a 1st for Jerry Jeudy to maybe getting a 3rd. Or you could kind of take a deal right now, like deal or no deal. The million's still out there. You're not going to get the million. You might get the freaking penny. Yeah. So deal, Mr. Banker, and let's go Howie. All right, next one. What about Courtland Sutton? How about Sutton to the Texans for a second? Like, they've got something going with C.J. Stroud. They are in a very winnable division, I would say, in the AFC South. The Jags are 5-2. The Titans stink, and the Colts are kind of sputtering in the wrong direction. Houston is just a game or 2 behind Jacksonville, and it's not like the Jags are notoriously, a great franchise, a consistent winning method down there in Duval. So a 2nd-rounder for a guy that offers you some long-term security at wide receiver. He's got a few more years left on his contract. That could be something Houston is interested for C.J. Stroud and his development. Now, if you were to trade Courtland Sutton, you would be doing it right now in October after June 1st. So the way it works in a midseason trade is take that base salary, $14 million. Take that $14 million, divide it by 17. That's his per game check. They've already given out 7 of those checks. So whichever team trades for Courtland Sutton would have to pay out the rest of his game checks for the remaining 10 weeks. So $14 million divided by 17, and then take 10, and that's what you're paying out. But you also could see Denver eat a lot of that money like they did for Von Miller and the Rams to get better draft picks in return. His dead cap hit, by the way, for 2024, if you trade him, is only $7.5 million, and the cap savings, $14.5 million. If you don't want to reset, retool, or rebuild, then keep Courtland Sutton. He's one of my favorite players on this team. He's a captain. He's been here for a long time. He's a tremendous part of the locker room. He's an awesome pillar in this community, just like Justin Simmons. And it sucks trading away franchise pillars away. Not cornerstones, but guys who have been here for a long time and guys that are culture installers in this locker room in great ways. But if you do want to reset and you do want to retool or rebuild or whatever you want to call it to make yourself feel better at night, then sell high right now because Courtland Sutton's stock is at an all-time high. He's got 5 touchdowns through the first 7 games of the season. The guy had 4 touchdowns total combined the last 2 years. His career single season high is 6. He's going to blow that out of the water. His value could not be higher right now. Now would be the time to sell. If you want to go down the rebuild path, sell Courtland Sutton, trade him, and get the most amount you can for him today because that value might not be waiting for you in March if you end up trading him after the season. Now, I don't want to know who you want to get traded. I want to know your honest prediction of who do you think gets traded. I asked this question because producer Trace asked me, and I was like, well, it's kind of tough to say because on one hand, Jerry Jeudy's younger, former first-round picks. That jumps out, a little more eye candy, if you will. But Sutton's more expensive but better. So they both have pros and cons to them. But who do you think ultimately gets dealt? My prediction, I think Courtland Sutton gets dealt. I could see Denver parting ways with the vet, saving some money in the process, and getting maybe the best draft capital in return for one of these two wide receivers. So I think if I had to pick one, Sutton feels more likely to go than Jeudy. All right, one last trade nugget I want to hit on before we get on out of here. So CBS rolled out a recent article with some mock trade ideas, if you will, and they included Josey Jewell going to the Miami Dolphins for a 2024 fifth-round pick. I would do this trade in a heartbeat. Not because I dislike Josey Jewell. No, he was one of the most consistent pieces on this defense last year, and he missed a lot of time. But Jewell's on the last year of his contract. They drafted his replacement, Drew Sanders, so you could get something now for Josey Jewell before he inevitably leaves in free agency because you just paid Alex Singleton and you just drafted Drew Sanders. You're not going to bring back Josey Jewell most likely. And you can also jumpstart the Drew Sanders and Alex Singleton linebacker combo that's going to be here for probably the next 2 seasons. So I like the idea of getting Drew Sanders some meaningful snaps, getting him on the field, getting him up to NFL game speed, and also getting a pretty good draft pick in a 5th rounder for a guy that's probably going to leave when the season is over. Look at Josey Jewell's numbers over the last 4 seasons. Like I said, in 2022, 128 tackles. He only played 13 games, 2.5 sacks, 2 interceptions. Now, he's missed some time throughout his career, but Miami's not looking for a franchise linebacker. They're looking for a linebacker to sharpen their defense as they go on a postseason run. And oh yeah, their DC, you might have heard of him, Vic Fangio. He loves a good off-ball linebacker. So I could see Josey Jewell being very appetizing for Vic Fangio, and maybe he gets in the Miami front office's ear saying, this defense with Josey Jewell will be that much better. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come hang out with us here at the Broncos Breakdown. We're going to sign off and see you all later.